Hello again. This is lecture 9 of 11153 on MIPS pipeline data path, and this is the last lecture focused on processor hardware data paths. The following will be covered in today's discussion. First, pipelining as a technique and the motivation behind it. 2. A pipelined implementation of a MIPS processor, where we'll consider the same subset of MIPS instruction as we have been using in our discussion, but this time without the jump instruction. Lastly, we will also discuss hazards and the three types: structural, data, and control hazards, which must be considered in the design of pipeline data paths to ensure proper operation. Our objectives for this week's module are the following: appreciate the concept of pipelining of tasks, identify the expected performance of an end-stage pipeline data path under ideal operation, understand the operation of a sample pipeline MIPS data path, differentiate the kinds of hazards that can be encountered in a pipeline data path, and last, identify hardware and software solutions for specific kinds of hazards. Let's start with a classic analogy of comparing pipelining with the process of doing laundry. Say we have a basket of clothes that we have to wash, dry, fold, and store, or sort, package, and deliver if you have some laundry business. Let's also assume for simplicity that each step takes 30 minutes each to finish. Thus, if we started washing at 6 p.m., then we'll finish by 8 p.m. for a late dinner. If each step takes 30 minutes, then why not we do all 4 tasks at the same time and finish by 6:30? Is that possible? Well, of course not. That's ridiculous and makes no sense. In this laundry process, we must follow some defined order of execution. We must only dry what has been washed, fold what has been dried, and store or deliver what has been folded. The same is true with our instructions. We must follow the order of fetching instructions, fetching operands, performing operations, and writing it into the target memory or register location. Now, if we have 2 more sets of clothes to wash, can we process them all at the same time and still expect to finish by 8 p.m.? Well, it depends on the capacity of our washing machine, and it also means you should be able to fold 200% more clothes in the same 30 minutes. Again, this does not make much sense, and we will also assume that each basket is the maximum capacity of the machine. Thus, we can put all clothes at each stage at once. Now let's say we repeat the process for each basket and do things in a sequential manner. Doing this will take 4 more hours to finish, and we'll be able to finish only by 12 a.m. Now this takes too long because such approach does not utilize the resources properly. Say from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. the washer is idle and not washing anything. From 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., the dryer is not drying anything, and so on. We need to be more wise to finish earlier and do our online modules, watch Netflix, or play some online games. Common sense would actually tell us that we need to keep each machine or stage busy to finish earlier. That is the fastest way, setting aside the other option of buying another set of machines or hiring more employees to do the tasks. With this quote-unquote pipelined execution, we are allowed to finish earlier by 9 p.m. And this is done by using the resources in parallel. For example, from 7 o'clock to 7:30, we are folding the first batch, drying the second batch, washing the third batch of clothes, all at the same time. However, note that we cannot fully utilize all 4 at the start. Also, if we have more clothes to wash and continue the process, we can expect that a basket of laundry will be finished every 30 minutes after the first one is finished, just like what happens here. So 1 set of clothes is finished every 30 minutes. In this laundry analogy, each basket of laundry corresponds to an instruction in our computer. The sequential execution presented is similar to how a single cycle and multi-cycle data path works, with the previous stage or block waiting for the whole instruction to be finished before processing another instruction. In this lecture, we'll learn how we can use our data path resources to process different instructions in parallel to achieve a pipelined execution. Now, let's compare how the single cycle and multi-cycle data paths differ with our envisioned pipeline data path. We mentioned in our previous lecture that the single cycle data path has a very long critical path. The clock must be able to accommodate the total delay of the slowest instruction, even if some instructions can be finished earlier. Thus, a single cycle data path have a CPI of 1 with a slow clock. To reduce the waiting time for faster instructions, we introduced the multi-cycle approach, where the critical path is divided into smaller steps. The slowest step now dictates and limits the clock speed that can be used. However, blocks in other cycles still wait for each instruction to finish completely before servicing another instruction. A multi-cycle data path can thus be operated with a faster clock with a shorter period, but with a CPI that is greater than 1. This will not always yield better performance, since CPU time is proportional to both clock period and CPI. A pipeline data path executes instructions over multiple clock cycles, but with all blocks kept busy processing different instructions at any given time. Like how a new basket of laundry is finished every 30 minutes in our previous example, we expect that one instruction will be finished every clock cycle, so CPI is equal to 1 in our pipeline data path, but still with a multi-cycle approach where the clock can be faster. Thus, we are sure to benefit from the faster clock since CPI remained at 1. A typical 5-stage processor pipeline is divided into the IF, ID, XA, MEM, and WB stages. IF stands for instruction fetch and is where the instruction memory is read to fetch the instruction. The PC increment also happens in this stage. ID stands for instruction decode, where the control signals are generated by the control unit from the instruction code. Since in MIPS, the operands are located at fixed positions in the instruction code, then the fetching of operands can happen simultaneously with the instruction decoding. XA is for the ALU execution, whether for some actual operation like AND or SUB, some computation of address, comparison of values, or some other thing. MEM is for the memory access, where the data memory reads and writes occur. WB stands for the register write-back stage. In this stage, the register is written with either the value fetched from the data memory for load words or the result of the ALU operation. The pipelined execution of these stages will result in the operation shown on the right, where the horizontal axis is time and the vertical axis is the instruction. Like in the laundry example, the pipeline is not yet full in the first few clock cycles, 4 clock cycles to be specific in this example. From the 5th clock cycle onwards, the pipeline is said to be already full. That is, every clock cycle, each stage is at work, and it can be also observed that after 4 clock cycles, the pipeline is able to finish 1 instruction per cycle. If the program is very long that the 4 clock cycles initially can be considered negligible, then the CPI must approximately be 1 cycle per instruction. Now, how good is this when compared with a single cycle data path? Consider a single cycle data path where each instruction takes 5 nanoseconds to finish. Upon further inspection, the figure on the right also shows that each stage takes 1 nanosecond to finish each. However, Note that there is no outline or solid line in between stages to signify that the execution happens continuously in one 5 nanosecond clock. The single cycle data path thus finishes one instruction every 5 nanoseconds. Now, if we convert this to a 5-stage pipeline, we can use a 1 nanosecond clock because each stage from our original single cycle data path finishes in 1 nanoseconds. The execution will still take 5 clock cycles to finish, and therefore each instruction still executes in 5 nanoseconds. However, one instruction is finished every 1 nanoseconds or every clock cycle once the pipeline is full. Thus, the speedup must be equal to 5 since we went from finishing one instruction every 5 nanoseconds to finishing one instruction every 1 nanoseconds. Note that this speedup is exactly equal to the number of pipeline stages, which is 5 in this example. This is also the best case and the ideal speedup from a single cycle operation to a pipelined operation. Thus, if we just divided the data path and operation into 2 stages, then the best speedup we can expect is a maximum of 2. However, that was just the ideal case. Here we consider a more realistic example. This time, the 5 stages in the data path take different lengths of time to finish. In this example, the IF and EXE stages take 1 nanoseconds, the ID and write back stages take 0.5 nanoseconds, while the MEM stage takes 2 nanoseconds. Note, however, that the total is still 5 nanoseconds, and single cycle operation allows each stage to start right after the previous one continuously. Then each instruction still takes 5 nanoseconds to finish, and thus one instruction is done every 5 nanoseconds. Now, if we convert this to a pipeline data path, what must be the clock period that can accommodate all the stages? Just like in a multi-cycle data path, the clock is dictated by the slowest stage. So this time, the clock cycle must be 2 nanoseconds as dictated by the slowest MEM stage, and the 5-stage pipeline timing should look like this. Note that each clock cycle is 2 nanoseconds and is just enough to fit the MEM stage. However, the 2 nanoseconds is too long for the rest of the 4 stages. As there are 5 stages and each clock cycle takes 2 nanoseconds, then each instruction will take 10 nanoseconds to finish. Wait, does this mean that the instructions take longer to finish execution? The answer is yes, and the per instruction execution time was actually degraded in moving from single cycle to our multi-cycle pipeline operation. However, since the execution is pipelined, then still one instruction is expected to finish every 2 nanosecond clock cycle once the pipeline is full. Thus, from one instruction every 5 nanoseconds, we now have one instruction done every 2 nanoseconds. Then, the speedup of execution for the whole program must be 2. Note that the pipeline execution actually speeds up the program execution by improving the instruction throughput and not necessarily the execution time. This example also shows that we were not able to achieve the ideal speedup. Since we have a 5-stage pipeline, the ideal speedup is 5, but we were only able to obtain 2. Let's see how we can compute the CPU time in an ideal pipeline data path. We will disregard the non-ideal operation caused by hazards, which we will discuss only at the end of the lecture. For now, consider a general X-stage pipeline operating under ideal conditions. For the first X-1 cycles, the pipeline is not yet full and no instruction is finished within this time. Once the pipeline is full, an instruction is finished every clock cycle. A program with I number of instructions will spend I number of clock cycles in this state. Thus, adding the two, the I-long program will take a total of X-1 plus I clock cycles to finish. We can then compute the CPU time by multiplying the number of clock cycles by the time per clock cycle or the clock period P. We can also write this equation in terms of the clock frequency or clock rate R and end up with X-1 plus I over R. If the program is long enough, that is, I is much greater than X-1, then the number of clock cycles is simply approximately I, and the CPU time can be approximated as I times P. Previously, we said that CPU time is I times CPI times P. In our expression here, CPI is actually 1 for our pipeline data path, so we just end up with I times P. So now we know how pipeline data paths operate from a high-level perspective. How then do pipeline data paths look? Or how do we make a pipeline data path? We can start with the single cycle data path we have studied 2 modules ago. From this data path, we constructed our multi-cycle data path by inserting registers at portions where we want the processing to be cut. Since pipeline data paths also operate under multiple clock cycles, then we still need to insert registers in between this data path. We'll just go full on and present the 5-stage pipeline version of our MIPS data path right ahead. The most obvious change, of course, is the addition of what we call the pipeline registers. These pipeline registers are named as IFID, IDXA, XMM, and memWriteBack to indicate which stages they separate. Since we have 5 stages, then there are 4 sets of pipeline registers. Now, instead of defining rules on how we came up with this data path, we will proceed by discussing how this data path works and convince ourselves that it indeed works. We also make observations in the process. We will also discuss the other minor and not so obvious changes along the way. Consider the 3 instructions shown on the right. We have add, load word, and store word instructions stored at addresses 50, 54, and 58 in decimal. Let's see how the series of instructions will be executed. We'll start by focusing on the add instruction alone and see how signals flow across the 5 cycles of execution. In the first clock cycle, the PC must start with a value of 50. Within this first clock cycle, the add instruction is fetched from the instruction memory and fed to the IFID register. The PC plus 4 update value is also generated and fed to the PC for saving. In this process, cell PC must be 0. Note that the PC plus 4 value also has a path below and will be saved in the pipeline register for later use in case that the instruction is a branch. When the clock rising edge occurs, the PC will be written with the value of 54, although we'll not highlight that anymore in this slide. On the next clock cycle, the instruction goes out of the IFID register and fed to the control unit, which is not shown, for instruction decoding and generating of control signals. While this happens, the contents of RS and RT 5, and 6 are fetched and goes into the IDXF pipeline register for saving. The control unit will detect that the instruction is an add instruction and assert the celldest signal to choose RD, which is 4, as the destination. However, note that this value is not fed to the write reg port of the register file, but is instead fed to the pipeline register. The PC+4 value is simply passed to the next pipeline register, and the sign extended immediate is a don't care for an add instruction. On the third clock cycle, the register contents saved in the pipeline registers are processed by the ALU and fed to the XMM pipeline register for saving. The cell of B must be 0 for the second register operand to be selected, and the ALU must receive the ALU op for addition. Whatever is stored as the sign extended immediate is ultimately not used, just like PC+4, since the instruction is an add instruction. Meanwhile, the RD value 4 is simply passed to the next pipeline register. On the fourth clock cycle, the sum is simply passed to the next pipeline register. The sum is also passed as the address to the data mem, but the read value will not be used eventually. The contents of RT or R6 is also received by the data memory, but will not be used since the write memory is 0 for an add instruction. The RD is also passed to the mem write back register. On the fifth and last clock cycle for add, the sum is allowed to pass through the last multiplexer with cell data at 0. The sum and RD goes back to the register file for the write process to finally happen, with write RF asserted. When the clock rising edge happens, the add is finally done. Now note how we needed different control signals across different clock cycles, even when the instruction was just decoded at the second clock cycle. Now, given the fact that pipeline operation executes instruction in a simultaneous or parallel manner, then by the third clock cycle of add, the control unit already sees a new instruction, which is the load word instruction, and that is being decoded at the second clock cycle. How then could the control unit provide the control signals at the other clock cycles, given that a new instruction is being decoded every clock cycle at the ID stage? Since the control unit will have to decode one new instruction every clock cycle, then one way to approach the pipeline data path control is to generate all the necessary control signals at the ID stage and then delay them into the data path using the pipeline registers as shown. As some of the control signals are used along the way, then less of the control signals are passed to the later stages. This is also similar to how the destination register number was passed to later stages until used in the fifth clock cycle. We next demonstrate the successive execution of the three listed instructions across different clock cycles. At clock cycle 1, the PC starts with 50, and the add instruction is fetched and saved into the IFID register, while the PC is updated with the value of 54. At cycle 2, The add instruction is fed to the control unit and control signals for add are generated. The contents of registers 5 and 6, which we need, are fetched while the right register number, which is 4, is passed to the IDX register for later use. At the same time, still at the second clock cycle, the PC starts with a value of 54 and the load word instruction is fetched and passed to the IFID register. The PC update value 58 will be written on the rising edge of the clock. Note that this time we are using colors as an indicator for relevant signals per instruction instead of per clock cycle. At the third clock cycle, the contents of R5 and R6 are added and the destination register number 4 is still passed to the next pipeline register. The control signals for add that are not yet used are also passed. Still at clock cycle 3, we go with the green for load word. The load word instruction is now decoded in the ID stage and register 9, which is RS, is fetched while the second red data, which is hardwired at RT, is a don't care for load words. Instead, this RT value is used as a destination register and passed to the IDXA pipeline register for later use. The output of the SINEX10 block is important for load words. The store word instruction also starts at the third clock cycle. The store word at address 58 is fetched and fed into the IFID pipeline register, and the PC is fed with the value of PC plus 4, which is 62. This value 62 is also passed to the pipeline register since the pipeline data path does not know that, is not yet sure that if this instruction is a branch or not. At cycle 4, the add instruction is already at the mem stage, although it has nothing to do except to pass the sum, the destination register number, and control signals to the next mem write back pipeline register. The add instruction also ensures that the write memory control signal is deasserted to ensure that no unwanted writes happen. And since the sum is also received by the data memory, then it still tries to fetch some data, although that data will not be used eventually. Meanwhile, the load word instruction at the exit stage computes the sum of the contents of R9 and the immediate 8 with an ALU op corresponding to add. Note that this time cell of B must be 1 for the immediate to pass through as of B. These control signals are the delayed control signals through the pipeline registers. The destination register number 7 is also fed to the XMM pipeline register. At cycle 4, the store word instruction is decoded. Contents of RS, which is 11, and RT, which is 10, are both needed in the store word instruction. Destination register, however, is a don't care since we are writing at the data memory for store words. The immediate value 12 is also sign extended and passed to the IDXA pipeline register. At this point, the PC value starts with a value of 62, which corresponds to the next instruction just below the store word instruction, although we'll not anymore consider the values happening at this portion, and we'll just remind everyone that there are just new instructions being fed into the data path every clock cycle. At the 5th clock cycle, the multiplexer allows the sum to proceed as the cell data is deasserted. Finally, the destination for add, which is 4, is passed back to the register file. The sum and the delayed write RF signal is also passed back, allowing the add instruction to complete when the clock rising edge occurs. The load word at the mem stage proceeds by fetching the memory data using the sum as the address. The data memory also receives some value at its data in port, but this is considered a don't care since the delayed write mem control signal is deasserted. Below the destination register number for load word, which is 7, is simply passed to the mem write back pipeline register. Still at the 5th clock cycle, the store word computes the sum of the contents of R11 and the immediate 12. This is using a cell of B of 1 and ALU op for addition. At the same time, the contents of RT or R10 is wired directly and passed to the XMM pipeline register for use in the next clock cycle. At cycle 6, the fetched data from the memory reaches the register file with cell data asserted. The delayed register number 7 also reaches the register file with now an asserted write RF signal. Meanwhile, the store word instruction at mem stage uses the sum as the address, and the contents of register R10 is also fed to the data memory for saving with write mem asserted at this point. We then expect at the end of cycle 6 that the intended memory address will be written by the store word instruction. Now at clock cycle 7, even if the store word has already finished writing into the data memory by the 6th clock cycle, which is the 4th clock cycle for store word, signals are still passed to the write back stage at this clock cycle, the 5th clock cycle for store word. However, the signals at this point are mostly don't cares, except for the write RF signal, which must be deasserted to ensure that no unwanted writes happen when the clock rising edge occurs. And thus, this completes the 5 clock cycles for the last instruction we are considering. Now let's consider a branch if equal instruction shown with the target address at 56. If we do the math, the offset for this case must be 8 encoded within the instruction code, since 56 is equal to 20 plus 4 times the offset. If we inspect how this is executed, the PC must start with a value of 20 to fetch the branch instruction until it is decoded in the second clock cycle. Contents of R1 and R2 are fetched for comparison in the third clock cycle through the ALU using a subtraction operation. Instead of the ALU result, what we are more interested for BEQ is the value of the zero flag, which is fed to some branch logic to determine if we are to branch at the middle of the third clock cycle, if we are to branch or not. However, since we are only evaluating the branch at the middle of the third clock cycle, then PC actually went through values 20, 24, and 28 by the third clock cycle. Now obviously, if the branch must be taken, then we must not execute instructions at addresses 24 and 28, although we were able to fetch them. We'll discuss the details on what happens to those instructions when we deal with control hazards. For the meantime, let's focus only on this branch instruction. Now going back, why do we even need a new branch logic block? Note that the instruction decode occurs at the second clock cycle, and by the third clock cycle, the control unit is already decoding a different instruction. Thus, some info that the instruction was a branch must also be delayed and passed to the branch logic aside from the zero flag. To be specific, the opcode must also be passed through the IDXA pipeline register to the branch logic block to say that to inform the branch logic block that the instruction at the third clock cycle is a branch instruction. Now, assuming that the branch logic detects the BEQ instruction and receives an asserted zero flag, meaning the branch must be taken since the result is 0, then it will assert cell PC 1, and the PC will not receive a value of 32, but instead the branch target address. Looking back, the branch target address is computed from PC plus 4 from the original branch instruction, which was delayed through the IFID and IDXA pipeline registers. The immediate 8, which was sign extended, delayed through the IDXA pipeline register, shifted left by 2 or multiplied by 4 to generate 32, is finally added using this adder to generate the target address 56. Since the branch logic asserted the cell PC control signal, then the PC will take in the value of 56, and at the start of the fourth clock cycle, since we are currently at the third clock cycle, the PC will now start with the value of 56 and proceed with in executing the instruction at the target address. It should be also noted that now the PC does not have a write PC control signal, unlike in our multi-cycle data path, since in this pipeline data path, the PC must be written every clock cycle. Okay, so now let's summarize some of the details we should have observed in our example MIPS pipeline data path. First, the control signals are generated in the ID stage at the second clock cycle and are delayed through pipeline registers for use in other clock cycles. Second, the PC+4 value is also delayed for branch target computation, which happens in our example at the third clock cycle. Note, however, that the PC+4 value is immediately saved to the PC at the first clock cycle, assuming that the previous or earlier instructions, the one at the third clock cycle, does not require branching, since cell PC is adjusted by the branch instruction at the third clock cycle. Fourth, there is a backward flow of information that occurs in the write-back stage or when branching. This actually causes hazards, which we will discuss next.